January 5th, 1967, 13:47 hours, 17 miles northeast of Thanh Hoa, North Vietnam. Commander Richard H. Dick Stratton's A-4 Skyhawk suffered a direct hit from 37 Liberty anti-aircraft fire, tearing through its port wing. The aircraft spiraled out of control as hydraulic fluid covered the canopy and altitude plummeted. With no time for radio calls, Stratton pulled the ejection handle. The canopy blew and the rocket motor propelled him skyward with immense force. Silence enveloped him, broken only by the wind through his parachute lines as he descended towards the rice paddies below. He counted down from 500 feet, hitting the ground hard. Before he could disengage from his harness, a militia consisting of enraged peasants with rifles and workers with farm tools surrounded him. A rifle butt to his kidney sent him to the ground, followed by kicks, fists, and a shovel handle that cracked against his ribs. They repeatedly dragged him up, only to knock him down again. For hours, they relentlessly beat him in shifts, his mouth filling with blood, his left eye swelling shut. He was paraded through villages, a trophy, enduring spitting and stone throwing. He tracked the brutal hours by the sun's position. By sunset, North Vietnamese Army, NVA regulars arrived, throwing him into a truck bed. The harrowing 3-day journey to Hanoi was spent in a windowless transport. Stratton lay on bare metal, his hands bound behind his back, with wire that cut into his wrists, every pothole sending agonizing pain through his broken ribs. Food was non-existent, and water was scarce, a single daily ladleful from a guard who deliberately spilled half. Other American prisoners huddled in the dark, their presence marked only by labored breathing. Communication was suppressed. Guards administered random beatings through the truck's metal grating at any sign of interaction. Outside, the sounds of bicycle bells and street vendors indicated ordinary life continuing despite the war. Inside, the men sought to remain invisible, trying not to move, not to draw attention, to simply not exist. A profound psychological weight immediately settled. They were now property, valuable only for what could be extracted. On January 8th, the truck halted. Gates creaked open, offering Stratton a glimpse of Hoa Lo Prison, a grim structure built by the French in 1896 for Vietnamese independence fighters, now housing American airmen. Its 15-foot high stone walls, topped with broken glass and electrified wire, along with guard towers at each corner, presented a formidable and chilling sight. The main gate's faded colonial architecture, almost elegant, compounded the horror within. Processing began immediately. Guards stripped him naked, clinically catalogued his injuries, and photographed him from various angles. A crisp uniformed Vietnamese officer circled him slowly, silently evaluating. Though he spoke no English, his expression conveyed a clear message. Stratton was a high-ranking, valuable asset. The beating resumed, methodical and designed to establish authority. An hour later, he was thrown into Heartbreak Hotel, a cell block named by American prisoners. His cell, a 7-by-7-foot concrete box, was damp and stark. A single barred window near the ceiling offered meager grey light. Amenities included a broken wooden sleeping platform and a waste bucket. The solid steel door featured a food slot and a peephole. From adjacent cells, Stratton heard coughing, shuffling, and whispered English prayers. Direct communication was forbidden, punishable by the ropes, a torture technique spoken of in hushed, terrified fragments. Lying on the bare concrete, Stratton realized Hoa Lo was more than a detention camp. The North Vietnamese sought not just compliance, but propaganda victories. They wanted American officers to denounce their government, confess war crimes, and divulge military intelligence. Physical torture was merely a precursor. The true assault would be psychological, calculated, and relentless. Daily life began at 05:30 with a gong. Food slots opened, and tin plates of watery pumpkin soup with a few grains of rice were pushed in. Lunch was identical, and dinner sometimes included rancid pig fat crawling with maggots. Stratton learned to eat it anyway. Starvation was a constant threat. Within 2 weeks, his flight suit hung loose. By a month, every rib was visible. Other prisoners appeared more skeletal, their eyes glazed as they shuffled to interrogations. The camp inflicted systematic degradation. Medical treatment for infected wounds was withheld. Basic hygiene was denied until cells reeked of human waste. Isolation was engineered by unpredictable prisoner rotations, thwarting friendships. Beatings were administered randomly, fostering constant anxiety. The interrogation system, however, was the most insidious innovation. Each prisoner underwent a softening up phase. Guards would drag men from their cells at irregular intervals, sometimes multiple times daily, sometimes not for weeks, shattering sleep patterns and mental equilibrium. Interrogators used a two-person strategy. One played the reasonable, sympathetic officer offering cigarettes and a path to end suffering, while the other screamed accusations and administered punishment. They repeated questions hundreds of times, seeking inconsistencies and wearing down resistance through sheer volume. Stratton's turn for interrogation came on January the 15th. Guards took him to a whitewashed room furnished with a table, 2 chairs, and a portrait of Ho Chi Minh. The interrogator, the officer, spoke fluent English. For 2 hours, he questioned Stratton about the USS Ticonderoga, its air wing, mission planning, and target selection. Stratton, adhering to the code of conduct, provided only his name, rank, service number, and date of birth. The officer remained patient. Then guards twisted Stratton's arms behind his back, wrenching them upward until his shoulders dislocated, and bound them with rope. He was then suspended from a ceiling hook. The officer repeated his questions. Stratton, in agony, reiterated his name, rank, service number, and date of birth. After an hour, he was cut down. The cycle of interrogation, torture, and repetition continued for days. Other prisoners endured worse. Through cell walls, Stratton heard screams from the ropes, a torture where rope tourniquets cut off circulation in arms bound behind the back, then cranked them upward until tendons tore. Men were left with unusable hands for weeks, some permanently disabled. He heard of hell cuffs, medieval iron shackles that locked wrists and ankles in positions preventing sleep or movement, leaving men incapacitated for months. He learned of the knobby room, a cell with concrete knobs on every surface, making sitting or lying impossible. However, the North Vietnamese reserved their most sophisticated cruelty for senior officers like Stratton. They coveted his image for propaganda broadcasts, aiming for confessions of bombing civilians and public denunciations of American policy. By late January, the interrogations shifted. The officer stopped military-focused questions, instead discussing American peace movements, war opposition, and the moral superiority of the Vietnamese cause. He showed Stratton edited photos of protest marches and offered reduced punishment for a simple statement condemning American aggression, promising an end to suffering with just a few cooperative words. On February 3rd, guards led Stratton to a new room with bright lights, camera equipment, and a microphone-equipped podium. The purpose was clear: to film him making a statement. The officer pleasantly informed Stratton he would read a prepared text admitting war crimes. Refusal meant immediate return to torture, potentially permanent injury, or death. He emphasized that other prisoners had cooperated, presenting it as a rational path to survival. The officer slid a typed statement across the table. Stratton's hands trembled as he picked it up. The document falsely detailed attacks on schools and hospitals, labeled American pilots criminals, and lauded the heroic Vietnamese people. Reading it would be a profound betrayal. Refusing would invite unimaginable pain. He sat at the table for 3 hours, the statement before him, cameras ready, while the officer alternated between threats and promises. Finally, Stratton spoke, claiming his mind was confused. He couldn't think clearly, and the words on the page held no coherent meaning for him. He babbled about colours and numbers, then asked if they had seen his shoe. "What shoe?" the officer demanded. "The one with the elephants inside," Stratton earnestly replied. The officer's expression transitioned from confidence to confusion, then to anger. They dragged him back to his cell and administered another beating. Yet something had fundamentally shifted. Stratton had unearthed a weapon the North Vietnamese could not counter. Propaganda necessitated coherent subjects. Cameras required prisoners capable of delivering believable statements. A genuinely insane man was useless for their objectives. Furthermore, international law protected mentally ill prisoners from interrogation. If Stratton were truly mad, torturing him could backfire, making the North Vietnamese appear barbaric even to sympathetic observers. The risk was immense. Feigning madness demanded absolute consistency under torture. A single slip, a moment of lucidity, and they would know, and the punishment for deliberate deception would be unimaginably severe. But compliance meant betraying his country and fellow prisoners. The choice was clear. Over the ensuing weeks, Stratton perfected his act. Random muttering, unfocused eyes, inappropriate laughter, and conversations with invisible people. He'd refuse to acknowledge questions until repeated multiple times, then respond with non sequiturs. He walked in circles, collected small cell objects, arranging them in meaningless patterns. He treated guards like old friends, cheerfully inquiring about their families even as they beat him. The performance had to be flawless every second, for guards continuously monitored him through the peephole. The North Vietnamese brought doctors to evaluate him. Stratton flawlessly maintained his act. He informed one doctor of radio transmissions he received through his teeth and another that he was a Soviet cosmonaut. Medical personnel documented erratic behavior, confused speech, and possible combat-induced psychosis. Interrogators attempted shock tactics, screaming or striking him suddenly to provoke normal reactions. Stratton merely stared blankly or giggled. They tried deprivation, isolating him for weeks, but he emerged conversing with imaginary cellmates. They offered rewards, food, better conditions, if he would just answer simple questions coherently. He thanked them profusely and inquired about the start of the Purple Rain. By March, camp administrators' frustration was evident. Senior officers personally visited his cell, demanding he cease pretending. Stratton drooled slightly and asked if they had seen his collection of invisible butterflies. They couldn't break him, for one cannot break what is already perceived as broken. Fellow prisoners understood immediately. Through the tap code system, American POWs communicated through walls, and word of Stratton's tactics spread. Others watched through cracks as guards escorted him past their cells, shambling and muttering, recognizing the brilliance of his strategy. He had discovered a resistance method that denied the enemy their prize while shielding him from the most severe torture. It wasn't immunity. Guards still beat him, denied him food, and kept him in solitary confinement. But the interrogations ceased. Propaganda sessions ended. The cameras remained absent. Stratton had rendered himself worthless to them, save for being a living body to account for. In late March, he was transferred to a different section of Hoa Lo, a block for prisoners deemed too difficult for standard processing. His new cell was worse, smaller, darker, but the psychological pressure eased. No more hours-long interrogations, no more threats of cooperation or consequences. They had given up trying to extract value from him. The act's cost was profound. Maintaining apparent insanity 24 hours a day for months demanded unrelenting vigilance. Any distraction, any natural reaction could expose the deception. Stratton slept in character, muttering nonsense, and ate in character, making strange noises and suspiciously examining each grain of rice. He endured beatings in character, responding with inappropriate calm or bizarre comments. The boundary between performance and reality blurred. Sometimes he genuinely forgot things or lost track of thoughts, the strain enormous, yet each passing day was another day he hadn't broken. Every avoided interrogation meant unrevealed intelligence. Every propaganda film they couldn't make was a small victory. Other prisoners were paraded before cameras, forced to read statements used as propaganda tools. Stratton had escaped this fate through the most unconventional resistance imaginable, weaponizing his own mind, transforming himself into a problem the North Vietnamese couldn't solve with their standard methods. By April 1967, Commander Richard Stratton had been a prisoner for 3 months. He had endured capture, brutal transport, systematic torture, and psychological assault. He had refused to cooperate through a method so unexpected that his captors remained bewildered. This, however, was merely the beginning. The North Vietnamese were patient. They would explore other approaches, testing his act repeatedly over years of captivity. Stratton knew that maintaining this performance indefinitely through every torture session, deprivation, illness, injury, and the grinding monotony of imprisonment would demand reserves of strength he wasn't certain he possessed. Still, he had committed to this path. There was no turning back. Guards watched through the peephole as he sat cross-legged on his concrete platform, engaged in an animated conversation with the wall about philosophical matters only he could comprehend. They saw a broken man, useless for their purposes. They failed to perceive the calculating intelligence behind the glazed expression, the officer who had transformed apparent madness into both his shield and sword. Stratton's true war was only just beginning. June 1967, Hoa Lo Prison, Hanoi. At 0300, guards roused Stratton, who had prepared for hours. The interrogator, the bug Nguyen Van Bai, sought more than propaganda films. He demanded a confession, specific bombing targets, and proof of American war crimes for broadcast. Stratton, slipping into character, shuffled into the interrogation room. His survival strategy was a sustained, feigned mental breakdown, rooted in psychiatric symptoms learned at SERE school. He'd witnessed fellow pilots crumble under torture. Now he mimicked their vacant stares and trembling hands with surgical precision, adding absurdity to make his act undeniable. When asked for bombing coordinates, Stratton's eyes went blank. He traced invisible patterns, muttering nonsensical numbers. 7:14 cucumber, Ho Chi Minh's birthday is May 19th, 73, the rice is burning. The bug slammed his fist. Stratton flinched, then giggled, a high-pitched sound echoing off the stone walls. This act required constant calibration. Too subtle, and he'd face worse torture. Too extreme, and he might be executed. Stratton balanced on a razor's edge, maintaining just enough coherence to seem potentially useful for propaganda, while providing no genuine intelligence. He knew from the tap code network that other prisoners, like Lieutenant Commander John McCain, were brutalized for anti-war statements. Commander James Stockdale, the senior ranking officer, had even self-inflicted injury to avoid propaganda appearances. Stratton chose a different path, poison the well. During the second week of June, the North Vietnamese escalated. Rope torture began at dawn. Guards bound Stratton's arms, tightening the hemp until his shoulders dislocated. The pain was absolute. For 90 seconds, his resolve wavered. Then his scream transformed into a gurgling laugh, eyes rolling back, drool trailing from his chin. "Make it stop, the purple elephants! Make it stop, the purple elephants!" The guard, confused, loosened the rope. The bug entered, studying Stratton for deception. Stratton met his gaze with a vacant, childlike grin, humming Yankee Doodle off-key. The bug barked a Vietnamese command, and Stratton was dragged back to his cell. Word spread via the tap code. Cell 7, Stratton still crazy act ? Cell 12, affirmative rope torture laughed like idiot. Air Force Captain Ron Byrne in Cell 3 pondered, "Is he really insane ? 12 hours later, Stockdale's response arrived. Negative Stratton protecting intel maintain act critical. This validated Stratton's actions. He wasn't just protecting himself, but denying the enemy their most powerful weapon, credible propaganda featuring a senior naval officer. By late June, the North Vietnamese, considering Stratton genuinely insane, planned to exploit him differently. They prepared a propaganda event, a press conference with French journalists and American anti-war activists. 3 days prior, he was moved to a special cell, given extra rice, and allowed to bathe. This preferential treatment, an obvious manipulation to improve his appearance, was accepted mechanically by Stratton. He never broke character, even in solitude. Knowing secret peepholes meant constant observation. Every moment was a calculated performance. The press conference was set for July the 6th. Dressed in clean black and white striped prisoner pajamas, Stratton was led through the prison yard. Other prisoners, in mourning formation, glimpsed him shuffling, head bobbing, lips moving in silent conversation. Captain Jerry Denton, who would famously blink torture in Morse code during an interview, stood rigid. Their eyes met for a fleeting second. Denton saw a flash of clarity beneath Stratton's mask before the vacant expression returned. In the humid conference room of the main administrative building, 20 journalists and activists sat amidst cameras and microphones. The bug stood beside a small stage. Stratton, led to a chair, immediately began examining his fingernails with intense fascination. A French reporter, via interpreter, asked the first question. "Commander Stratton, why did the United States send you to bomb the peaceful people of North Vietnam?" Stratton looked up, smiled beatifically, and began, "The flowers grow in December when the moon is made of cheese, and my mother said, never trust an elephant with nuclear secrets. So we dropped the bombs on the hospitals because President Johnson's birthday is in August and fish cannot ride bicycles." He giggled. The room fell silent. The bug's face darkened. This was not the coherent confession promised. Stratton continued, "Ho Chi Minh is a wonderful man who lives in a teapot with 7 dancing bears, and I personally murdered 17 babies before breakfast because that's what cowboys do in Texas, yee-haw." He slapped the table, laughing at nothing. After the disgusted journalists departed, the bug understood he had been played. The question remained, insane or mocking? His life depended on the answer. A small Vietnamese doctor, a Paris-trained psychiatrist with wire-rimmed glasses, was brought in. For 3 hours, he subjected Stratton to tests, ink blots, simple tasks, reactions to stimuli. Stratton maintained his flawless performance, but introduced subtle inconsistencies, correctly solving a math problem, then failing to identify a dog, giving his mother's real name, then claiming Napoleon Bonaparte as his father. The doctor took notes, conferring with the bug in rapid Vietnamese. 2 days later, the assessment: the doctor believed Stratton suffered from traumatic psychosis, possibly genuine or exaggerated, but severe enough that continued torture could lead to permanent catatonia or death, rendering him useless. The bug, unsatisfied, ordered a new approach: isolation, observation, then sudden confrontation to shock Stratton out of his act. He was moved to Heartbreak Hotel, a brutal section. The cell was 3 feet wide, 6 feet long, dark, and over 100 degrees. For 6 days, with minimal food and water, he was watched through a peephole for any sign of falseness. Stratton knew this isolation was the ultimate test. Alone in darkness, he had to maintain the act even without a visible audience, knowing he was always observed. He constantly talked to himself, a stream of nonsense, carefully avoiding coherent thoughts aloud. He sang children's songs with wrong lyrics and argued with imaginary companions about fictional events. The heat was crushing. Dehydration blurred his thoughts. On the 4th day, he questioned if he was truly losing his mind. He bit his cheek until it bled, anchoring himself with the pain. This was an act. This was survival. This was denying victory to the enemy. On day 7, they pulled him out. The bug waited with 2 guards and a new interrogator, Cat, a colonel from Hanoi's military intelligence. Cat, the prison commander's deputy, an English-speaking, French-educated psychological warfare expert, was known for breaking stronger men. He smiled pleasantly. "Commander Stratton, we know you are faking. This performance insults the Democratic Republic of Vietnam. You have one opportunity to confess and cooperate. Refuse, and you will be executed as a war criminal." The room contracted. Stratton felt the immense weight of the moment, realizing this impossible barrier. Cat offered a binary choice: confess and face torture for intelligence, or maintain the act and face execution. Both paths could mean death. The silence stretched for 20 seconds. Stratton felt Cat's eyes searching for micro-expressions. Any tell? This was the decision point. Everything hinged on the next 60 seconds. Stratton let his mouth fall open slightly. He tilted his head, studying Cat with the focused interest of a child examining an insect. Then, in a high sing-song voice, "The cat in the hat comes back. He comes back the very next day. But the fish in the pot says, 'No, no, no, make that cat go away.'" He giggled. He reached out and patted Cat's hand like a friendly pet. Pretty kitty, does the kitty want some milk? We have milk in America, lakes of milk and mountains of hamburgers, but here we only have the purple rain that makes the guards dance." Cat's expression remained neutral, but a flicker of uncertainty crossed his eyes. He spoke sharp commands in Vietnamese to the bug, who barked at the guards. They grabbed Stratton, dragging him toward the door. Stratton went limp, forcing them to carry his full weight, humming "When Johnny Comes Marching Home," replacing every word with "banana." Cat, face like stone, calculated: execute and risk international attention on a truly insane prisoner, continue interrogation and waste resources on a broken man, or try a different approach in the cells. The guards paused at the door, awaiting Cat's decision. Stratton hung limply between them, head lolling, a thin line of drool at his mouth. His heart pounded, but his face remained slack, empty, the mask perfect. Cat spoke one word: "Dio, go." The guards hauled Stratton into the corridor, back toward Heartbreak Hotel. Commander Richard Allen Stratton, POW 354, disembarked a C-141 Starlifter at Clark Air Base on March 4, 1973, after 2,251 days in captivity. Though physically ravaged by Hanoi's torture, weighing only 147 pounds from an initial 185, his sharp gaze betrayed a profound secret. His 6-year apparent mental breakdown had been a calculated act of defiance. His immediate debriefing by Air Force intelligence revealed a naval officer who had executed one of the most sophisticated psychological resistance operations of the Vietnam War, not a broken man. Medical evaluations at Clark detailed severe physical trauma, spinal compression fractures, permanent nerve damage in his shoulders from hell cuffs, hearing loss from blows to the head, and broken teeth from interrogations. However, Dr. Robert Mitchell's March 11, 1973, psychiatric report noted Stratton's remarkable psychological resilience and sophisticated understanding of propaganda techniques. Mitchell confirmed Stratton's debriefing explanation. Every element of his feigned madness, from a 1967 Hanoi press conference bow to feigned catatonia, was deliberate. Other returning POWs corroborated this. Commander James Stockdale, a senior POW, confirmed via tap code that Stratton was playing crazy, and Air Force Captain John Dramisi witnessed his coherent private behavior contrasting sharply with his public persona. Stratton's debriefing provided crucial intelligence. He detailed North Vietnamese interrogation methods, identifying interrogators by description, and charting the evolution of torture from 1967-1973 as international pressure and peace talks influenced their tactics. He distinguished between POWs coerced into propaganda and those who collaborated, aiding military assessments. His insights into propaganda filming procedures helped intelligence analysts understand enemy objectives, informing future survival training. Crucially, Stratton's testimony provided evidence of systematic torture, though war crimes prosecutions were hindered by the Paris Peace Accords' complexities. Following his return, Stratton underwent 3 months of intensive physical rehabilitation at Naval Hospital Bethesda, including surgeries for torture injuries and treatment for tropical diseases. His wife, Patricia, who had tirelessly advocated for POW recognition, faced the challenge of reintegrating her husband. Their 4 children, aged between 2 and 9 at his capture, now barely remembered him. Unlike many POW marriages, the Strattons endured, strengthened by Patricia's understanding of his psychological ordeal. By June 1973, Stratton returned to active duty with the Office of Naval Intelligence, applying his resistance and propaganda analysis expertise to update SERE, Survival, Evasion, Resistance and Escape, training programs. On November 15, 1973, Secretary of the Navy John Warner awarded Commander Stratton the Legion of Merit with Combat V device. The citation honored his exceptionally meritorious conduct as a POW, recognizing his ingenious psychological countermeasures in resisting propaganda and denying the enemy intelligence while maintaining communication with fellow prisoners. This medal acknowledged active resistance, signifying his feigned insanity as a weapon. He also received the Distinguished Flying Cross for his actions on January 5, 1967, the Bronze Star with Combat V, 2 Purple Hearts, and later the Prisoner of War Medal. Stratton's naval career spanned another 14 years. After completing the Naval War College in 1975, he was promoted to captain in 1977 and commanded the Naval Technical Training Center in Meridian, Mississippi. His POW experience deeply influenced his leadership, emphasizing mental preparation and resilience in training. He advocated for sophisticated psychological preparation in survival training, pushing for realistic SERE scenarios to counter propaganda exploitation, drawing directly from his Hanoi experiences. In 1981, he commanded Naval Air Station Cecil Field, retiring in 1987 at age 54. Despite losing 6 prime career years to captivity, he achieved every milestone available to a naval aviator, a testament to his abilities and the Navy's recognition of his service. For nearly 2 decades post-release, Stratton's story of psychological resistance remained largely within military circles. Unlike other POW narratives that gained immediate public attention, his complex technical account was challenging to popularize. Post-Vietnam public interest in war stories was limited, and publishers favored accounts that either simplified or glorified the conflict. Stratton's story of psychological warfare did not fit these popular narratives. Media coverage of Operation Homecoming in 1973 focused on senior officers like James Stockdale, or heavily wounded prisoners whose visible injuries provided dramatic visuals, overshadowing Stratton's invisible mental struggle. The early 1990s saw a renewed interest in Stratton's story, as military historians and Vietnam War researchers accessed declassified debriefing records. Dr. Stuart Rochester and Frederick Kiley, Office of the Secretary of Defense Historians, extensively interviewed Stratton for their 1999 study, Honor Bound: American Prisoners of War in Southeast Asia, 1961-1973. This book dedicated significant coverage to Stratton, analyzing his resistance methods within the broader POW experience and North Vietnamese exploitation. Access to detailed intelligence reports, propaganda footage, and interviews with other POWs allowed Rochester and Kiley to corroborate Stratton's account, establishing its historical credibility beyond informal POW community discussions. Documentary filmmaker Ken Burns featured Stratton in his 2017 PBS series The Vietnam War, reaching millions. The documentary included footage of Stratton's 1967 Hanoi press conference bow, juxtaposed with his explanation of its deliberate nature, visually showcasing his psychological operation. This brought his story to a new generation, sparking interest in POW resistance. In 2019, Alvin Townley's Defiant, the POWs who endured Vietnam's most infamous prison, the women who fought for them, and the one who never returned, provided detailed coverage of Stratton's Hanoi Hilton experience and resistance methods. These works cemented Stratton's story in the historical record for researchers, educators, and future military personnel. Modern SERE training programs now incorporate Stratton's case as a prime example of psychological resistance. At Navy and Air Force SERE schools, instructors use footage of Stratton's bow and his explanation to teach students about resisting propaganda. The training emphasizes that resistance takes diverse forms, and apparent compliance can mask calculated defiance. Stratton's example illustrates that the code of conduct's requirement to resist to the utmost of my ability encompasses mental operations, not solely physical endurance or silence. His case is specifically cited in Instruction on Propaganda Countermeasures, teaching trainees how to undermine exploitative objectives even when seemingly complying. The National Museum of the United States Air Force in Dayton, Ohio, features Stratton's story in its Southeast Asia War Gallery, displaying photographs and explanations of his resistance. Likewise, the National Museum of the Pacific War and the National POW Museum at Andersonville National Historic Site reference his case, ensuring future military personnel and civilians understand its significance. Captain Richard Stratton continued to speak about his experiences until his death on November 25, 2016, at age 83. He addressed military, veteran, and academic audiences, consistently emphasizing mental preparation and the psychological aspects of survival. His presentations focused on the professional challenge of resistance and the importance of training for psychological warfare rather than bitterness. He asserted that captivity survival required the same planning, discipline, and execution as any military operation, with mental preparation being as crucial as physical endurance. Patricia Stratton noted that her husband considered his captivity a successful mission, taking professional pride in denying the enemy any propaganda victory despite their sustained efforts. Stratton's case stands out for the sophistication of his resistance and his willingness to endure further punishment for a strategic objective. Unlike many POWs who resisted through silence or minimal compliance, Stratton actively engaged in a psychological operation against his captors, leveraging their propaganda machinery against them. He understood that the North Vietnamese prioritized credible-appearing footage over genuine cooperation, and he delivered material so obviously coerced or bizarre that it became worthless. This required not only courage, but analytical thinking, meticulous planning, and sustained performance over 6 years. His story demonstrates that effective resistance adapts to circumstances, that perceived weakness can be weaponized, and that psychological warfare is a two-way street. For modern military personnel facing potential captivity, where exploitation might be more dangerous than physical torture, and where propaganda can be globally distributed, Stratton's example offers both inspiration and practical guidance. He proved that even under absolute enemy control, and even when forced to cooperate, the manner of compliance can constitute profound resistance. His 6-year performance in Hanoi's interrogation rooms and before its propaganda cameras exemplifies that a properly trained and courageously deployed mind remains free even when the body is in chains, and that psychological victory can be denied to an enemy who controls everything but the prisoner's will to resist.